According to ancient lore, hell hath no fury like a terminated academic with nothing but time and a deep rabbit hole of university corruption to explore. Welcome to this special bonus episode of The Awful Shadow. Today we're taking a brief detour to explore Academia Culpa, the fundamentals of big box university autocracy, a satirical, phony textbook that lies at the heart of this project. While it'll be a while before we fully delve into Academia Culpa in the larger narrative, I think this preview will help set the trajectory for where we're headed. So what is Academia Culpa? It's part satire, part critique, and entirely a reflection of how modern universities, particularly the University of Texas at Austin, are increasingly resembling autocratic corporate entities. Each chapter zooms in on a specific topic, event, policy, or lack thereof, or circumstance I encountered when I began unraveling how an assistant dean with a questionable record in the business world and no previous academic experience was able to terminate my contract without any accountability. Although Academia Culpa is a satire, everything in it actually happened to me and, in some cases, is still happening to others. It would be easy to dismiss this as an overstuffed revenge project, and I'll admit I questioned my own motivations at times. But the deeper I dug, the more appalled I became. Along the way, I shared my findings with a trusted group of anonymous academics familiar with UT Austin, who not only corroborated my research, but also pointed me toward even more unsettling discoveries. In the end, I approached this as both a critic and a proud alumnus of UT Austin. What I crave, what I downright ache for as I fend off this ceaseless parade of clueless tin cup rattling donation pleas from my alma mater's alumni association, is for the university and academia at large to pull its head out of its ivy-clad butthole and do better. The eventual printed version of Academia Culpa will feature formatting and design elements inspired by traditional academic textbooks. I'll aim to make the audio version reflect that same structured, textbook-like feel wherever possible. As with any good textbook, the printed version will include plenty of graphs and visual aids. In the audio adaptation, I'll describe these elements clearly and concisely to ensure they enhance the narrative without bogging it down. And since Academia Culpa is nested within a larger narrative, each chapter will follow a specific format. Chapter X, Academia Culpa. Chapter Y, name of chapter. Why? Because yes, I'm a little OCD like that.
Chapter 22. Academia Culpa. Chapter 2. BRAC-Listed. Hidden committees that investigate faculty and staff without consent. Key terms and concepts. BRAC. Hollywood Candy Company. Payday. Onager. 5th and 17th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Due process. Hidden but published. Pedophile ring. Pizza parlor. Prominent lanyard collection. Satire. Threat mitigation cover sheet.
I began my doctorate at UT Austin in January 2007. It came after a whirlwind few months, a brief stint in Ann Arbor for doctoral studies at the University of Michigan, the ensuing debacle with Michael Dougherty's composition program, a long drive back south, and a detour in St. Louis, where I proposed to Marie at the top of the Gateway Arch. I commuted from San Antonio all but 1 year of my doctorate. For that 1 year, I needed to rent a room for at least 2 to 3 days a week because the course load and teaching I was doing as an assistant instructor became too fierce. I rented a room in a funky, cool, cheerful bohemian house from a delightful woman named Genevieve, who I had met a few years earlier while finishing my master's degree. Fast forward. Not long after I filed a lawsuit against UT Austin for retaliatory termination, Genevieve, who I had stayed in contact with via the usual social media frequencies, put me in touch with another friend, also a UT Austin professor. I met Alberto Martinez, a UT Austin professor of history, in December 2020. Al had filed a lawsuit against UT Austin less than 2 months before I did, also alleging retaliation, and he and I have been close friends and fellow co-op players in a role-playing video game set in the world of UT Austin autocratic big bosses ever since. Early on, Al said I needed to check out something called the BRAC, or BRAC. He described it as a secret university committee that answers to no one, that is not mentioned in the UT Handbook of Operating Procedures, or HOP, and that investigates faculty and staff without consent. Al told me that a colleague of his was called into the UT Austin Police Department for some reason, and that someone in the UTPD had mentioned to the colleague that he was referred to them by something called BRAC. I was skeptical. It just didn't seem possible. A secret committee of a public institution that investigates faculty without consent. At the time, BRAC UT Austin didn't reveal anything whatsoever via a Google search. It still doesn't. I would later understand BRAC to be an acronym for the Behavioral Risk Assessment Committee. And so, in 2023, as I was writing this as the chapter for the print version of the project, Googling Behavioral Risk Assessment Committee UT Austin yields exactly 2 hits. It's really 1 hit when you realize that it references 2 editions of the same PDF document, something called the University of Texas at Austin Emergency Operations Plan for 2019 and 2022. In the 2022 edition, this is how the BRAC is described. The Behavioral Risk Assessment Committee reviews situations involving staff, faculty, and individuals unaffiliated with the university whose behavior may pose an adverse impact to the university community. The BRAC is a multidisciplinary group with members from human resources, legal affairs, the Office of the Executive Vice President and Provost, and the University Police Department. The BRAC reviews, investigates, and assesses reports of troubling behaviors and situations involving employees and unaffiliated individuals. It wasn't long after my lawsuit was filed that I started to learn how to submit open records requests. In and among requests I was making for files relating to my termination from UT, I first requested information about the BRAC at UT on October 22nd, 2021. I was specifically looking for files that would indicate a BRAC investigation of me. If they cannot find or do not have what a requester requests, UT Austin Open Records typically issues a response that reads, "The University of Texas at Austin has completed its search and determined that we do not maintain any information responsive to your request." That is why on April 12th, 2022, nearly 3 years after I was handed a termination letter by Doreen Lorenzo, I first learned that the BRAC likely investigated me. On that day, UT Open Records sent me an estimate for reproducing all documents related to the evaluation of Dr. Jack W. Stamps by the Behavioral Risk Assessment Committee, otherwise known as BRAC. The estimate was more than I could afford, and Carla, my employment attorney for the UT lawsuit, despite her grave concerns about the existence of such a committee, didn't think the information would have any direct relevance to the claims in my retaliation suit. Re-examining this period in my life, the 3 years between the filing of the suit and its settlement, is very, very hard and haunting. I was deeply depressed, my morale and self-esteem, each a lead balloon inflated with misery and fear, tethered to my waist, somehow suspended me weightlessly within an even weightier medium. I was struggling with a major brain injury and lower back injuries. More on that in part 4. Also, my mother had died somewhat suddenly. The medications I was taking for depression, anxiety, and physical pain seemed as useless as swimming trunks on a rain cloud. I took my attorney's advice to leave the open records and due process issues for after the conclusion of the lawsuit. But for now, since I cannot stop thinking about my wonderful mother, here is an example of where my inclination toward justice and speaking out comes from. In the 1980s, in cursive, on ruled paper, Mom wrote directly to Hollywood Candy Company, the company that made the Payday candy bar. She detailed the decline of the Payday as she saw, or rather tasted it. It had fewer peanuts. The peanuts tasted less salty, just generally different. She loved the Payday. Sometime later, she received a large box of Payday candy bars from Hollywood Candy in thanks for her feedback. She believed in justice and the importance of speaking out, making sure your voice is heard by the right parties, and of course, confronting the injustices of denigrated confections.
Hearken, forsooth. Behold me now, brandishing a stout onager wrought entirely of stale, unsalted peanut candy bars, with an ammo bucket filled brimmed of records requests, cast toward a sinister tower, the dark silhouette of which beclouds the noble tenets of the 5th and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution. And these words, cherished listener, I proffer unto thee.
With the settlement of my lawsuit against UT Austin finally behind me, I again began requesting BRAC-related materials. I wanted to know how it worked, who it reports to, what it produces as a committee, and how the university acts upon whatever instrument the BRAC produces. On July 26, 2023, I requested any documents that explain what the Behavioral Risk Assessment Committee, or BRAC, does, what its charge is, who wrote the document, and the identification of the person or persons the committee reports to. Also, please identify the name of a person at UT Austin that I may contact to interview about the BRAC. University of Texas at Austin responded with 2 documents. One is an editable Word document called BRAC_admin_business process. It is about as detailed as a diagram that explains nuclear fission using only nerds and lemonheads. It has 2 sets of 3 bullet points, one list called daily and another called monthly. Among bullet points, there's this one under daily. Monitor email correspondence between BRAC members. Identify new cases and make them a new case file in Box folder. Also, add them to the BRAC spreadsheet. Or this one under monthly. Save the agenda in Box. The remaining information describes little more than how cases are spreadsheeted, made into PDFs, added to meeting agendas, and monitored for a minimum of 3 months before reassessing whether they should remain or be removed from the agenda. There is no information about what the actual agenda is or who the BRAC reports to, and no information about what the committee produces. In response to another records request from around the same time, I received the names of all BRAC committee members, their roles at UT Austin, and in the BRAC. Adrian Howarth Moore, the then chair of the BRAC and VP of Human Resources at UT Austin, is no longer at UT Austin and is now serving a similar role at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. I reached out to Ms. Howarth Moore about BRAC, and she replied only to say, "I am not interested in participating in a discussion involving BRAC." I sincerely appreciate that she responded. Perhaps basic courtesy and communication aren't risks at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. On July 26, 2023, I followed up on my request for information regarding the BRAC's investigation into me and proceeded to pay the required reproduction fee. The 125-page PDF produced in response to my request is nothing short of nauseating and infuriating. The first 2 pages is an email thread that begins with what immediately jumps out as a coached, edited, and formatted email written by Professor David Cohen, the person who took over my big class. The email sent to Doreen Lorenzo and Michael Baker, Chair of Arts and Entertainment Technologies, has certain passages bolded and underlined while other passages are just bolded. In the email, Cohen accuses me of defamation, discrimination, and victimization. Elsewhere, he says he blocked me from social media, using, quote, the same tactics he would take with a stalker, unquote. Cohen also accuses me of targeting and even goes so far as to say I put his family's safety at risk. He says I tried to take advantage of an illness he had to get him removed from AET 304. All of this is somehow related to a 45-minute meeting we had about the handing off the class and some things I wrote in a long letter to fine arts faculty that addressed my experiences at UT Austin. To be clear, I was upset about my termination, and I shared my feelings with Cohen, but I consented to meet with him, something I was not required to do. I was civil and as helpful as a person who just got terminated could be, and probably more. For the record, not that it matters much now, I liked David Cohen very much. He was an affable and upbeat guy. Be that as it may, everything in his email is complete horseshit, all primly planned and punctuated, and the BRAC files do not provide any evidence for Cohen's claims. And perhaps most distressing is the lack of any evidence that the BRAC committee ever attempted to corroborate these incredibly libelous claims. One would assume the BRAC, in the position it was in, would promptly reach out to a faculty member accused by another faculty member of being a stalker the second it received the information. Alas, BRAC never reached out to me. Ever. In the long letter I sent to faculty before I left, Cohen is mentioned in only one place, where I discuss how nearly all the witnesses, Cohen being one of them, I had called to testify at my grievance hearing were conspicuously absent. I wrote that I wanted to ask questions of Cohen about how and when he was given access to all of the material I created for my big class he was taking over. That's it. That is the source of Cohen's claims that I maligned his reputation. The implications for the passage are far more damning for those who granted Cohen access to my work without consent. Arm of the state, the Internet of Collusion, IOC, Jack. Elsewhere in the open records is an email thread containing this, written by Dean Doug Dempster to Doreen Lorenzo with way-ups from the UT Tower copied. At least he has not accused you, Lorenzo, of running a pedophile ring in the basement of a pizza parlor. Not yet, anyway. Dempster's unforgivable pedophile quote addresses a message I had written to department faculty that passed on the disturbing information of multiple students shared with me right after the end of my contract at UT Austin. These brave students reported to me a fear of retaliation by Lorenzo and the reasons for their fears. But let them explain it for you. This email, with multiple students as senders, is the reference point for what ended with my being characterized as being capable enough to accuse someone of running a pedophile ring in the basement of a pizza parlor. Hello, Jack. Our names are redacted, and we are recent UT design grads. We're close friends with one of the people in the video that was shared on Instagram, and she shared your letter to SDCT with us. We really appreciate you sharing your story with everyone, and we're sorry about what happened. We want to let you know about something similar that happened in the design department. We reported racist comments, bullying, and sexual misconduct that we and other students experienced from a specific faculty member in the design department. We were met with many of the same things you described in your letter. Our concerns were brushed off by Kate Canales and Monica Pinnock. We told other faculty about our situation, but as you proved that speaking out puts their jobs at risk, so many couldn't do more than file an OIE or Title IX complaint. We've also realized that speaking out isn't as easy as it seems. We've lost connection with the faculty member who has the most networking opportunities for jobs. We've spoken with other alumni and students who also can't speak out because their jobs are tied to him. As recent grads, we're scared to speak out anymore against Doreen, as she knows so many people in the design community and can put us at risk for not getting a job. We want to organize with more students, alumni, and faculty who have been put in a similar situation for speaking out against abuses. We would like to help in any way possible. We are trying to figure out a way to share these stories without putting anyone in a difficult situation. Please let us know if you're organizing anything. We would love to be involved if possible. Redacted and redacted. OIE and Title IX. Sound familiar? Kate Canales is the chair of the Department of Design, and Monica Pinnock, the assistant chair. These are former UT fine arts students who were corroborating what I had been saying about fine arts administration all along. There was no response from BRAC about Dempster's cheap shot pedophile comment, and presumably no pizza parlor searches. Elsewhere in the open records is a place where Doreen Lorenzo accuses me of targeting her with music. She once again reached out to the gatekeepers of the UT Tower's special confidences to write that, quote, "A fine arts employee who is connected to Jack on Facebook brought this to my attention." The employee recognized that several of the song titles are directly related to me. Now, if this was an isolated incident, I would certainly ignore it. However, as we put all the pieces together, this makes me pause. Unquote. Who is we? There is most certainly an MC Debris playlist on SoundCloud called A Lente Combustion de l'Homme Infini, Sketches and Textures, that contains short 1 to 2 minute sketches with these intensely libelous and threatening song titles. Bitch Proctor Butterfly, The Honorable Nothing Pinata, Silenced Here with Bias, Miserable Polka Dot, Fraud and Tiny Rights, Innocent Gift Grifter, and Heroes Marked by Prominent Lanyard Collections, which is also the alma mater at the beginning of this book. All this stuff was written after I was terminated and stands as a personal, musical commentary on some of my UT experiences. The Tower got back with Lorenzo, suggesting she contact Susan Harnden, the BRAC chair at the time of Lorenzo's email. Harnden, also a licensed clinical social worker, had this initial response to my alleged harm by music. My take on it is that it sounds like a relatively productive way to deal with his frustration, but I'd be happy to hear Lorenzo's interpretation. That must have really torqued Doreen Lorenzo. She immediately met with Harnden to share her hard-hitting psychomusicological analysis. Shortly after, Harnden's song changed, writing back to the Dempster Lorenzo high-ups thread. I looked them over, and honestly, they seem like legitimate arguments, even if he doesn't get a say in the situation. Let's be clear about what I just read to you, dear reader. A chair of a hidden committee that investigates faculty and staff without their knowledge or consent, who is also a licensed clinical social worker, confirms that those investigated by the BRAC don't get a say in the situation. You would have to be a grandmaster seer or a conspiracy theorist to make the connections Lorenzo would have Harnden and the BRAC believe. Why? Here's why. My MC Debris sketches in Alente Combustion, de l'Homme Infini, have no lyrics. The sketch collection is also, of course, satire. The prominent lanyard collection reference is less about Lorenzo specifically, although she does have a praiseworthy collection, and more about the state of academics in general, as exemplified by the corporatist hiring and the autocratic approach to academia that Lorenzo exemplifies. There was also a piñata in Lorenzo's likeness that she had standing next to her at a department meeting. Multiple colleagues found it shallow and self-absorbed, not unlike believing a bunch of instrumental musical sketches were written to torture just you. Susan Harnden, the BRAC chair and licensed clinical social worker, got it right the first time. I was indeed working out my feelings about my unlawful termination with music. I recently reached out to Harnden to get some comments about BRAC, how it operates, who it reports to, what it produces, and for what purpose. She has not responded. And finally, the records I received show that Lorenzo reported me to the UT Police Department over an article I wrote about my UT experience, published to medium.com after I was terminated, called Does This Happen at Your University? Part 1. I have since removed the article and its planned subsequent installments for inclusion in this project, and the medium.com article, reworked a little, is now the chapter Sex, Lies, and IP Addresses, Big Sign. It is most certainly not about Doreen Lorenzo specifically. The UTPD even enlisted some specialists to see if I had encrypted the article with spyware. The UTPD never reached out. If they had, I could have easily cleared up the clerical errors that came from the UTPD using web searches to find out where I live, the make and model of my car, my driver's license, and license plate numbers. Instead, we get proof of UTPD and BRAC's lack of any investigation of this matter by way of the fact that my father, Jack W. Stamps Sr., is the individual cited, along with his car and address information, in the UTPD's threat mitigation cover sheet. My wonderful father is a lot of things, but he isn't me, and it is deliciously ironic that Pop is a highly skilled career investigator. What would Pop count among the essential components of an investigation? He'd say, addressing us in his calm and clear tenor, that the answer varies from instance to instance, but like bread to a sandwich, you cannot have an investigation without gathering evidence and interviewing the accused. These BRAC records have generated new requests for written evidence that I defamed or stalked, that the BRAC actually investigated these allegations, that I wrote music to terrorize, that my perception of all that happened to me at UT Austin is indicative of my being skewed enough to accuse someone of running a pedophile ring. I have asked for records of any legal precedents, statutes, or definitions that would support the painfully defamatory and deprecating claims about me that the BRAC should have asked my accusers of. A year later, Still nothing. Just last night, Alberto Martinez called. He is a great human. He called because he believes I was shadow banned or down throttled on Facebook. I didn't even know what any of that was. He was concerned that an article in a local newspaper that I shared on Facebook yesterday got only 3 likes from my 1,300 friends in 6 hours. I just thought I was deeply unpopular on Facebook, and I am not really a fan of the platform anymore. The article is about Al's successful pro se appeal to the conservative Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to reverse a lower court's ruling and send his retaliation lawsuit against UT Austin to a trial by jury. Al believes my tagging him in my post is the only reason why he even saw the post, and that members of UT Austin administration are more than willing to complain about content on a Facebook page in order to elicit a shadow ban to protect its brand. Al is not a conspiracy theorist. This morning, I looked through all my Facebook pictures and found exactly one that might be considered objectionable. It is of a styrofoam plate with 2 hot dog weenies on it. One weenie is cut through about 1 inch with some ketchup around the cut. The knife is showing prominently with some ketchup on it. The second weenie has little beady eyes and raised eyebrows of surprise as it looks to the side at his neighbor. It is hilarious. I posted it 10 years ago, and I can't believe I just deleted it. Alberto shared something with me that I hadn't considered before, something that now leaves me weeping as I try to figure out how to write about it. He explained in a calm and resigned tone that the BRAC had evolved from a previous committee called the TAT, or Threat Assessment Team. The TAT's primary mission, he said, was to protect UT Austin from potential mass shooting events. It struck me that TAT-like teams exist in various forms on university campuses nationwide. What a sobering, bittersweet kind of relief. But wait, my son John Henry starts college in less than 3 years. His father was investigated, without consent, by a committee at a university that is an arm of state government as being a potential danger to people without any investigation at all. How then does John Henry's father convince his son that UT Austin is a safe choice? I'm still a dedicated Longhorn. If I was investigated as a possible threat to the lives of human beings on the UT Austin campus, isn't that an obligatory reason to interview me, ask some questions, get evidence, cross-examine, and so on? Seriously, will my son or any of your children be safe on a campus with such an embarrassingly feckless threat assessment program? And should I now delete my Charles Whitman reference in the previous chapter? I always thought that the risk in BRAC referred to any risk posed by potential threats to UT Austin's reputation or to the careers of its various Doreen Lorenzos. Alberto Martinez's take on my BRAC story is profoundly and deeply saddening. It is not easy proofreading these pages filled with such deceitful and libelous characterizations of me, reviewed by some hidden committee without any means to defend myself for some purpose that I may never know, while knowing that I still haven't found a teaching job in academia.
Jack now thinks of himself as but a shriveled straw wrapper of a man today. Hark! Humour hath long been the ruse to combat melancholy's grasp, and apply a few drops of water to a shrivelled straw wrapper. It is more than just a little humorous that as Jack earnestly studies the bleached and blurred hues of these perpetuate and patterned libellous refrains, applied in nuanced, impressionistic brushstrokes, as shrivelled straw wrapper birds find revival in a gentle precipitation and take flight with baskets of unsalty peanuts in the fore. A truly grand water-lilied, parasoled and gondolaed irony is slowly revealed as he steps gently backward and realizes in a pale flash of revelation that the BRAC itself is utterly conspiratorial. Now that you know. Become familiar with how your institution investigates risk. This may prove difficult. Ask around. Check with the director of the department that handles behavior and with the chief of the law enforcement entity on campus. You may consider making an open records request for information on the committee, department, or other entity that investigates risk and/or behavior of faculty and staff. If you are successful in finding the existence of such an entity, check to see if it is mentioned in the Handbook of Operating Procedures of the institution. Check to see how visible the entity is to web searches. Use an open records request of your institution to check and see if you are being, or have been, investigated. Write a letter to a company that makes a product that has fallen in quality over time. Mention how much you had come to rely on the level of the quality that changed. Be mindful. Use ruled paper and write in cursive if you still know how. Then forget about it. Write a short instrumental about an autocrat.